Today, I want to show you guys the crimes that I've committed in OneBit Adventure. So, for those of you who don't know, I am the lead developer of OneBit Adventure, a game I created about 5 years ago as a free-to-play, turn-based roguelike adventure game, which has reached over 3 million players. It has made me a full-time indie developer, thanks to the amazing community for spreading the word. But unfortunately, throughout all those years, my code has been so bad, it has spaghettied and lasagnaed all over, and I felt like it would be a nice idea to share my code and show you how bad. I thought it would be a great idea to share my code and show you how bad some of the things are. It still is a functioning game, and I can't be more happier than that. So with that said, you will hear different sound effects in the background. I'm literally right next to a window and cars drive by like crazy. You might also hear my dog Yoshi, who is a cute dog, but he is annoying at times. Let's start off with the player script in general. So, the player control script is the main script that handles everything the player does and is not broken up into different sections. So you will notice on your left-hand side, there is a lot of different words and no header to determine what section is what. For an example, this right here, soul count, soulbound, these are necromancer data that is only used by a necromancer, but there's no way of knowing it unless you remember what soul stands for. We also have equipment. Like, equipment is literally every single data in terms of weapons in game that have special properties to them. I've made it all into one area where it's not even a list, it's not bunched up together. It is one of the crimes of, I know what the code means, but someone else is gonna have a tough time trying to figure out what I'm doing. So that is definitely a crime of itself. Make headers and trying to optimize how everything looks. Another thing I want to go into, and I guess I should show you the game in terms of, so you get an idea of what this game is like. The whole concept of OneBit Adventure started off in mobile, so you would actually use a finger to swipe and choose a direction you would want to go, and then you would also move in order to attack. And when I released it on PC, I made it so that you use WASD to move around, and you can also use spacebar to wait a turn and attack. So pretty straightforward. It doesn't get too complex until you start gathering equipments and start learning active and passive skills that makes the game a whole lot fun. It is endless in terms of roguelike. You're just going up the steps and you'll see the step timer grow, and the further you go, the stronger the enemies get. So with that out the way, now we can jump into some other things that ended up being more harder to understand, and that is the way the player works in terms of dealing damage. So let's go in to the player control and actually dive into how damage works. So starting off, everything happens in the update. As soon as you input something, it is going to tell whether or not we should move or should attack. Are we pulsing red because we're low on health? Things like that all happen in an update script. There are a lot of codes like this in my spaghetti mess that are part of open beta tests that ended up never. It's still in the game, it's just not used. So Shrine is something that was supposed to happen, ended up being scrapped, and I know players want to see it more, but having old code that has no use in a public release, definitely delete it if you're not using it. My fans will be sad if we delete this, so I'll keep it here just for you guys. So now moving into the movement, we're gonna go into the movement, and we're still not at the take damage script yet, so please be patient with me. So we do have some variables that are a little bit of a mess, right? This deals with the bottom of the screen. If the player goes to the bottom, he'll instantly die and get an achievement for that. There was a bit of a mess with how I handled with the new input system. There's just so much other things. I don't want to talk about the input system. Let's just ignore that. But the move timer is when the player ends up moving, there's a little delay before you can move, and we are done with the movement strip. Now we're actually going to move the player, even though we haven't really detected much. So move player, this is our most basic way to get access and tell which direction is the player moving. And then we go on into a bit of a mess because we're like deciding, is the player gonna wait or is the player gonna move? We're gonna go in and decide if the player pressed the wait button, let's wait, all right? And if they did it, then we do a bunch of if else. You can see the spaghetti, right? I don't know if you see the spaghetti or the lasagna. This is not optimized, but it works for OneBit Adventure, and I would say if it works, don't fix it, right? We're there. So going in, we have decided to move, and we're moving the player in the move player script. The move player function into the moving player function. Now, let's check if this causes confusion, and I think it does cause me confusion a bit of a time, so maybe we'll have to invert controls. So, now we're finally getting closer to sending the damage to the enemy. Now, force move is my definition of make the player move, but I also am moving the player, so we force move it. And we're right click, go to definition, just in case you're following along. That's how I jump around through the scripts. We're gonna check if the input is able to move, because you can't move like every single frame. You have the delay of 0.51 seconds, but that is modifiable, like the speed of it. Then we're gonna check collision, and colliding is the take damage, the interact, the everything about the script, and we're gonna go into it. We're gonna send a direction, and then we're gonna do a lot, baby. Yeah, we're gonna do a lot. Let's just ignore the mess this, because this is all the inventory. Is the item throwable? Did you use a skill attack? Stuff like that. And this is not accounting for the enemy, which we're getting into that right now. We're getting there. So we're gonna go ahead, and now this is where the real code starts. Hit raycast, right? We're gonna raycast. The target position is actually the player position and the direction that they're actually going to attack, right? And when we do hit something, it will check the tag of the object. So tags are a big way to determine what an object is. And for an example, for those of you that I'm expecting, for those who are watching the video, that you guys know a bit of Unity, which this is what I made my game with, is Unity Engine. If we go into the actual enemy, we'll see that on the top left, there is a tag for him to say that he's an enemy. But if there's a wall object, for an example, this little pillar, there's a tag saying it's a wall. So moving into this wall does nothing. But if we move into the enemy, it knows that it's an enemy, and so it will do this script right here. So we go into this big list of tags, and the tag of enemy is somewhere right here. There we go. Enemy is gonna end up doing a lot of different things, and now we're getting into meat of actual mess of code, which is, again, like I said, this was 5 years of just me looking at tutorials. Oh, this works. Let's try this. Oh, let's do this. A lot of if statements will be happening, and this is how I've managed to survive all these years. Please help me, because this is this is terrible. So going in, we're gonna look at different things from different characters and different unique variables that happen throughout different characters, if that makes sense. So puppet arms is, well, let's start off the top. Enemy info is the main script for enemy, and we are going to save that variable as temp. I don't know why I did not name that enemy. I named it temp because it's temporary, even though I could have just named it enemy. So temp.ally, is this a friendly person? If it is, we'll switch places. Oh, I left a comment. That's crime number 4. I don't know what crime number I'm on, but commenting is very helpful. And if you don't comment, you are wasting a lot of time trying to look for code. And that's basically my life right now, is I remember this stuff. And yeah, let's move on. So if you are an ally. We're gonna switch places with you because we're not attacking you, and that's how this works. If you have an equipment that is sweeping or an equipment that does scatter, let's attack the enemy that's in range first before we end up attacking the person that's right in front of us. And then let's cache hostile, because I needed to know if an enemy was hostile before determining certain attacks. And let's just say this is all skill-based stuff that we don't need to worry about, and then we will move the enemy. So where did I ended up attacking the enemy? Oh yeah, that's right, else. Yeah, right here, the else statement. So this is actually the script, the function that I was looking for in order to attack an enemy is right here, right? We got it, guys, we got it. So attacking an enemy goes into a lot of different variables, and you know what? I'm just gonna stop right there. That's a crime in of itself, just going through 20 different functions in order to find the attack enemy script. So, you know what's fun about video games is the progression into a game and what you can do. Well, in terms of what we have here is we have a pyromancer character. This is recorded before I actually released the pyromancer second tier professions, which unlocks different abilities. So we can go ahead and select it, and we can add, let's say, a fireball skill, right? Learn it. Boom. Now we can use the fireball, and when we click the fireball, we can cast it and do its your basically your skilled attack, right? In terms of adding a new skill to the game, I have to go through maybe like 5 different scripts before I can even determine what makes a fireball a fireball, if that makes sense. So you know what, let's go into how a fireball ends up spawning. So we're gonna search for case 102 because I've named that. I don't know what I named that 192. Yeah, let's just leave that the way it is. So fireball is skill number 102, and this is how I go ahead and run it through a player script. So if we go all the way up, spawn active attack. Now this is a function that triggers after you press that skill icon, which is the fireball, and we will go through everything that ends up making that work. We hide different UIs such as soul counter. Even if you're not a necro, it just disappears. And pause the game, and then there's a lot of other variables, but for the most part we're gonna focus on the fireball. And if we go search fireball, this is actually going to spawn those attack blocks that you saw. It's like the red exclamation. We preset that. We don't have it on the side. We actually have to call it out. So that's a crime, and it's a crime. It's a crime. So going into our next case 102, I've made sure to keep them together. So it selects based off current active skills and then aligns them into a line. So let's go into it. We have the direction that we're pointing at and the start position, and that's how we reposition the tiles so that it ends up displaying. So at least that's correct. That's very simple. That one's good. That's only because I just created that script like 2 weeks ago, so it's fresh. It's fresh. Moving on to the next part of the fireball, because we need to actually what why did I do that? Well, we're going into a case that just breaks out. Just for an example, we could like ignore, we could actually just delete this and nothing would change. I'm just not gonna delete it, because if I delete it and we get errors, then I would be like, I told you so. So moving on to the next part of the fireball is actually what happens is we already passed through a bunch of script that said if else, and now we have the variable saying that we're gonna shoot the fireball. First off, Pyromancer takes damage. That's just the way Pyromancer works in 1-bit. They take damage when they cast different skills, except for Fire Barrage, which we're just leaving that as is. But it take the damage. This is the 5%. We get the health, and this is actually from Formula Script, which again, this is more clean, right? We get to do math and just get whatever we needed based off the level our character is, and then we subtract it. Now this is actually going based off base HP. There's other variables, but for now it's just base HP, and it's the least amount of damage you can take. And we take the damage. Next, we have lava spots. It used to have lava. It doesn't have lava anymore, so we could just delete that, and I think it'll be fine. We get a list of enemies and a list of hits. This is based off how many times the fireball lands on an enemy. Bosses in the game are 3x3, so you can deal up to 3 times the damage for each fireball tile. We're gonna do a for loop, going in through all the attack spots that we have, and our favorite of all is to raycast all and decide, is it an enemy? Well, then we're gonna attack the enemy, but before we do that, we want to figure out how many hits are we doing on the enemy. So this is not too bad. Going into breakable, if we hit a breakable tile, we'll attack the breakable. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then we go into a bit of the weird stuff. So we damage multiple enemies, and by this we're collecting that list of attacked enemies, and we're seeing if it's targetable. If so, we'll continue. If it's not an ally, we'll also continue. So we just try to make sure that we're attacking enemies and not allies. So going on, we calculate the damage. This is a bit of a mess. I only started doing this about a year ago, where you actually know what the damage type is: physical, fire, magic. Before that, it was not as clean, but it's clean now. So we damage the enemy. If we hit the enemy multiple times, we multiply it, and then we take damage. Well, the enemy will take damage, and then we will text display what the damage was. This is not done through damage script, is done through whenever we want to. So display that text pop up, and then we give it the status effect burn. There's a lot of different things going on right now, but trust me, it is very simplified and probably could have been done a lot more easily. Kill info is actually what happens after an enemy dies. Achievements happen, stats get tallied, stuff like that. And we do this in the loop, and we're pretty much done. And there's that comment, spawn lava AoE. We don't need that. It's still there. We don't need that. So finally, we've dealt the damage. Now let's spawn that magic effect of fireball. So this one is pretty self-explanatory, but it's the player position, and then fireball is the name of our animation that I have already preset. One is despawn timer, and then we do a little bit of math to get the direction of the fireball and where it needs to go. And then the last is scale, which it's going to remain 1F. It's the same scale. After we've done our fireball, we unfreeze, we do a wake for any enemies that need to wake up, and then we move enemies. So you notice this is a common thing, is we move things after, instead of doing it yeah, you could see what I mean. We copy and paste every single time we need to do something, instead of adding it at the very end. So common crime for a lot of people, a lot of programmers, is we'll have a function that could just be happening every time, and we end up copying and pasting it, even though we could just call it once. So yeah, that's a common issue for 1-Bit Adventure throughout the years. So yeah, take that with as a lesson. If you could do it once and not copy and paste so much. And I think the last bit of crime I want to go into, which might just take a little bit longer than I expect, but in terms of player inventory. So if we load into the game, right, there's different items on the floor and we can pick it up and it goes into what is essentially our list of items, right? So we're just gonna force spawn different items and you'll see it picked up all the items. If we check our inventory, there it is, all the different equipment and items that we end up needing or end up using. This is done in 3 different lists. Instead of just one list that tells you everything, it's 3 different lists. That's a crime. If we go to the left-hand side, we're gonna stop the game. We're gonna go to the left-hand side and see this right here, this right here, and this right here. Item ID, item amount, and equipment. Every single item has to add to this list. And if we go into the game now that I've shown you that, we are gonna collect a single item. I don't want to collect a bunch of different items. I just want to collect a single one just so we can be clear about what's happening. We're just gonna skip over this wall. Okay, there, we're good. I thought it was a mimic. We're gonna collect this potion, right? If we look on our left hand side, as soon as we collect the potion, we have 3 different lists that determines one item, and it's also producing an equipment variable. It's not optimized. No, I think I should go back and optimize this, but it is not optimized at all. So item ID 6 is what a potion is, item amount 1, and then equipment. It's not an equipment. It doesn't use any of these variables, but it is loaded into the game as, yeah, it needs it, you know? So let's go into the script of it, right? Because there's times where I end up doing things right. Like for an example, this is that equipment script that you saw. Unique IDs, all the variables that make an equipment in an RPG game. This is a correct way of doing it. I could have made this into an item, or I should say, yeah, I could call it items. An item script that has the item ID, amount, and equipment into one, but I just did not. I don't know why. But let's go in and see the item ID and how it works, right? Because I'm just doing this video so you guys don't make the same mistake that I'm doing, and hopefully you'll make updates a lot faster than me. So it jumps around, but what I'm looking for is item usage. Using the item, we're in a different function, sorry about that. Using item. Now, this is when we click the item to use it. This is going to determine the index, which is where in our list of items that we're using an item, right? And then after we use it, we consume it and remove it from our bag, which is essentially true. Can't use is for things like equipment. If we go ahead into this function, you'll notice some old code right here. Game mode 3, you could just ignore that. That was when there was more than 2 game modes, classic and hardcore, but ignore that. ID, this is actually going to be what item is it and how we utilize it. Right off the back, there is going to be some good and bad things. This is from 5 years ago that I decided why not use item as a function and redo the math here. If we go into, let's say 17, you'll notice now we're into what is essentially equipment, which is the only ID 17 is equipment. This is when we return false because we're never going to use the item. It's an equipment. So we'll go ahead and equip it, and if we'll update the inventory to let them know that it's equipped and make a sound. So yes, a crime of a crime is having items not be utilized in a simplified manner, such as this equipment being ID 17 is going to cause a mess in terms of adding an equipment and then figuring out what to do with it. So if you guys enjoy this video, like this is me just showcasing my code and how bad it is. Let me know in the comment section down below, and give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to stay on track with the latest updates. I am in the process of trying to work on Dungeon Greed. It is 1-bit, but in multiplayer fashion. That is something that's going to take a lot longer to figure out. With that said, my name is Jonathan Concepcion Rodriguez, and I will catch you guys later.